Have you ever wondered how a simple shepherd became one of the most powerful and controversial kings in history? Well, today you will discover not only how David defeated giants, but also how he faced invisible enemies, fears, betrayals, and even his own mistakes. In this video, we will delve deep into the fascinating journey of David, the man after God's own heart. You will learn details that are rarely told, from the moment he was forgotten by his own family to the moment when his courage changed the course of an entire war. You will follow his desperate escape from the deadly jealousy of King Saul, understand how he built unlikely alliances, how he transformed Jerusalem into an eternal symbol, and of course, we will not hide his sins and failures, because that is where the secret of his humanity lies. And stay tuned, because in the next few minutes you will see how rebellions arose, even within the palace itself, how his son became an enemy, and how his psalms reveal the pain that no throne can hide. So, take advantage of this. Subscribe to the channel now, activate the bell, and come with us to discover every piece of this incredible story. And I'll tell you in advance, in the next topic, we'll talk about a certain giant who thought no one would ever have the courage to challenge him. Is that really true? Stay with me and you'll understand. One late afternoon, in the middle of the golden hills of Bethlehem, the smell of damp earth mixes with the distant bleating of sheep. There, among rocks and bushes, stands a skinny boy, his hair disheveled by the wind and a simple staff in his hands. In the eyes of the world, just another shepherd boy, but the sky was already whispering another story. David, Jesse's youngest son. The one no one invited to the party, no one saw as an option, no one would bet a penny on, while his older brothers paraded before the prophet Samuel, tall, strong, with warrior airs. He remained in the field, forgotten, invisible. But that is where the divine irony lies. While everyone was looking at appearances, God was observing something that the eyes could not capture: heart, willingness, purity. That boy, so used to fighting lions and bears to protect his sheep, was already being prepared for something much greater. When Samuel asked Jesse if he had another son, the mood became disconcerting. "There is one more. He is taking care of the sheep," he replied, almost without importance. They sent for him in a hurry, and there, before the surprised eyes of the family, the improbable was anointed, a vial of oil poured not only over his head, but over the destiny of an entire people. But David did not yet know the weight of this choice. He returned to the field, staff in hand, sheep around him, and a secret burning in his chest, because before facing thrones and wars, he would have to face much greater giants. And speaking of giants, it is precisely in the next chapter that colossus that no one dared to face appears. Want to know how a simple shepherd with a stone became a legend? Get ready, because the upcoming duel would change everything. The battlefield was in chaos. Armed men trembled, spears on the ground, eyes wide. On the other side, a monster nearly 10 feet tall mocked, spitting words as sharp as swords. Goliath was more than a warrior. He was a living wall, a nightmare in flesh and blood. For 40 days, no one had the courage to face him. No soldier, no general, not even the king himself. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. There in the middle of the camp, a skinny young man appears, without armor or shield, carrying bread and cheese for his brothers. It was David, the same shepherd boy who had recently been anointed in secret. He looks around, hears the giant's taunts, and simply asks, "Who is this uncircumcised man to defy the army of the living God?" What happens next borders on the unbelievable. David refuses the royal armor and instead takes only a sling and 5 smooth stones from the stream. While the giant laughs at his audacity, David runs toward him. He doesn't walk, he doesn't hesitate, he runs. A single stone, aimed right, makes the giant collapse with a crash. And there in front of thousands, a shepherd boy with no status brings down the greatest symbol of fear. But what few realize is that that moment was only the beginning, because defeating Goliath was easy compared to the next challenge, surviving the envy of a maddened king. And it is precisely about this relentless hunt that we will talk about in the next chapter. Get ready, because David will now exchange battlefields for dark caves and endless chases. You will see how he became the #1 enemy of the very throne that, ironically, he was destined to occupy. Imagine living with the constant feeling of having someone lurking, ready to stick a spear in your back. Thus begins the most suffocating phase of David's life, no longer facing a giant, but fleeing from an obsessed king. Saul, the powerful monarch, sees his popularity plummet while the people sing about David's victories. And jealousy, oh, it burns like fire. David goes from hero to fugitive overnight. He leaves the palace banquets for the alleys of the caves. He sleeps in the open air, lives in hiding, with a small group of loyal men that he himself gathered, people in debt, lost, marginalized. Instead of an elite army, he leads the forgotten. But the most curious thing is that, even with clear chances of eliminating Saul and ending that endless persecution, David spares his enemy. Twice. He cuts a piece of the king's cloak while he sleeps, and on another occasion steals his spear without spilling a drop of blood. What kind of man has the power to change his destiny in his hands and still chooses to wait? Behind these decisions, there is a deep sense of respect for something greater than himself. David knows that thrones do not belong only to those who take them, but to those who are willing to be shaped in the desert, and it is precisely in this desert that a decisive encounter is about to happen. In the next chapter, you will witness how an unlikely pact with someone from enemy lineage turns into one of the most beautiful and tragic bonds in history. Want to know who this unlikely ally is? Don't leave. In the midst of all this insane escape, surrounded by the sound of enemy footsteps and the echo of the caves, David finds something that no one expected: true friendship. Not just any friendship, but a bond forged in the midst of chaos, stronger than political alliances or self-interest. We're talking about Jonathan, the son of King Saul himself. Now imagine the scene. On one side, Jonathan, heir to the throne, a respected prince with everything he needs to follow in his father's footsteps. On the other, David, the young shepherd now on the run, unjustly accused, living as enemy #1. But the improbable happens. Jonathan sees David not as a threat, but as a brother. He recognizes something in that man: courage, loyalty, perhaps even a reflection of what he would like to be. They make a secret pact, an oath sealed not out of convenience, but out of genuine love and respect. Jonathan goes so far as to hand David his royal robes and weapons, a gesture loaded with symbolism, as if to say, "The throne can be yours, I don't care. What matters is who you are." But every strong friendship carries with it the shadow of tragedy. Because while they forge this unshakable alliance, the war outside continues, and Saul remains mad, determined to destroy David at any cost. But wait, because the next chapter holds a hard blow: the death of his greatest ally, and how this loss will deeply affect the man who is about to become king. And believe me, the weight of this farewell will echo for a long time in David's story. You'll want to see it. The shadow of death falls upon David in a way he never imagined: the loss of Jonathan, his friend and brother. When Saul and Jonathan fall in battle, the news comes as a devastating blow. It is not only the death of the prince that hurts, but the loss of a pure friendship, which David himself knew he would never find another like. And it is in this pain that the question arises: how to continue, how to move forward when you lose the only person who truly believed in you. David, with tears in his eyes and a torn heart, does not hide his pain. He sings a lament, the famous Song of Lamentation, in which he mourns the death of his friend, but also the fall of an era. But what David did not know at that moment was that Jonathan's death was, in a way, the end of a cycle. With the death of King Saul, the throne of Israel was finally open to him. But it would not be easy to take what was rightfully his. There were other claimants to the throne, and power struggles are never fair. In the midst of all this, a man named Ishbosheth, Saul's son, appears, claiming his place. And what follows, as you can imagine, are years of war and intrigue, with David being put to the test not only as a leader, but as a man of faith and patience. In the next chapter, we will see how the kingdom divides, and how David begins to win the hearts of the people, little by little, despite everything that was yet to come. Get ready, because now David's journey to the throne of Israel really begins to take shape. The war scenario does not diminish. On the contrary, it only intensifies. David, now king of Judah, is in a fragile position. The kingdom is divided. On one side, he has his own loyal army, but on the other, Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, with his army and the support of a good part of the tribes of Israel. What seemed like a direct path to the throne turns into a long and bitter struggle, where each battle is a game of patience and strategy. But David knows that to win the hearts of the people, he needs more than just military victories. He needs to show that he is worthy of the people's trust, that he can unify the tribes, that he can be more than a conqueror, but also a fair, respected, and wise leader. So, little by little, he gains ground. First, he wins in war, leading his army to conquer more territories. Then he presents himself not only as the unbeatable warrior, but also as the man who understands the people's pain. He calls to himself those who suffer, embraces those who have been wronged, and begins to build the foundation of a kingdom that is not won by force, but by the loyalty of the heart. But the real fight is about to begin, because as David advances his reign, betrayal and challenges become closer than he ever imagined. In the next chapter, you will see how the loyalty of some of his own men begins to be tested, and how a political turnaround can change everything. All this because of a single decision and an unexpected new ally. But is he really an ally? In the heart of a political and military battle, David begins to experience what true human frailty is. The victory over Ishbosheth and the other tribes of Israel does not come clean. The price of unifying the kingdom is higher than he imagined, and in the midst of this power play, a betrayal emerges that threatens everything he has built up until then. Abner, the commander of Saul's army, and now Ishbosheth's main ally, decides, for mysterious reasons, to turn against Saul's son and join David. But this alliance comes at a price: the murder of Ishbosheth. This act is not only a political crime, but a reflection of the instability that hangs over the kingdom. In making this decision, David not only accepts the murder, but also has to deal with the death of his own enemy, who, paradoxically, has always been his most distant obstacle. What follows is a series of chain reactions that David never anticipated. He who has peace as his goal sees Ishbosheth's blood flow for causes deeper than any territorial dispute. At the same time, he finds himself in an uncomfortable position, being questioned by his own followers, who wonder if he is, in fact, the man of God, or if he is simply playing the same power game that Saul played. But it is not only politicians who challenge David, it is his own morality that begins to be challenged. What does he do when his own men, the most loyal, want him to pay for the wrongs that have been done in his name? How will he stand firm in the face of so much corruption, both inside and outside his own kingdom? Now, in the next chapter, the plot gets even darker. David will discover that not even the power of a king can stop the cycle of pain and revenge that he has inadvertently fueled. Because as he rises, others begin to fall, and the enemies will not only come from outside, but from within his own household. David, now king of all Israel, finds himself faced with one of the greatest dilemmas a leader can face: the weight of responsibility. It is no longer just about defeating enemies or conquering lands, but about maintaining the unity of a kingdom that is, in some ways, always on the brink of division. And as he begins to realize that peace is never permanent, not even in his own household, the truth reveals itself in a cruel and unexpected way. David's son, Absalom, is someone the king loves deeply, but what he doesn't realize is that the relationship between them, marked by trust, turns into something toxic and treacherous. Absalom, eager for power, and even more so for recognition, begins to undermine his own father's authority. He uses his beauty and charisma to seduce the people, and little by little he wins the hearts of even David's trusted men. David, the man who defeated giants, who crossed deserts and caves, now faces the greatest challenge of all, a rebellious son. David's own blood turns against him, betraying him in the most intimate way possible. And what makes the situation even more painful is that David, in his fatherly love, tries to avoid war. He hesitates, even when everything around him is falling apart. As Absalom prepares to take Jerusalem, David finds himself fleeing the city he loved and fought to establish as the capital of Israel. And what happens after his escape will test the very limits of David's humanity, both as a man and as a king. Because when a son's pride turns into an army, loyalty that once seemed solid is now in ruins. In the next chapter, you'll see how the war within David's own family becomes a spectacle of pain and revenge, leading to a devastating confrontation between father and son. Brace yourself, because what comes next will stir your deepest emotions. The civil war between David and Absalom is not just a struggle for power, but a visceral battle for the soul of a family. The king, who once felled giants with his faith and courage, now finds himself facing the most painful giant of all, his own son, arrayed against him, determined to take what has always been rightfully his. The city of Jerusalem, the jewel of the kingdom, becomes the stage for this bitter war, with David forced to abandon everything he had built and flee the city he had once ruled with greatness. But what David did not expect, what he could not foresee, was that this escape would come at a price that would extend far beyond the battlefield. The pain of being rejected by one's own son is a pain any father fears, but one that David experiences in a cruel and relentless way. He sees men who were once loyal now turn away from him, men who swore allegiance now turn traitor. But even more painful is the fact that David, despite being the king, cannot control the hearts of the people. And what Absalom has is the ability to win people over with sweet words, while David, the true king, begins to seem distant and defeated. However, David is not willing to let it all go without a fight. He prepares for the final confrontation, knowing that Absalom's army, for all its strength and zeal, is powerful, but also immersed in a web of pride and vanity. The father, who loves his son more than his own life, does not yet wish to kill him, but war is inevitable, and the battle, when it comes, is fierce. The battlefield fills with shouts, the sound of spears crossing, the echo of broken hearts. But victory, when it comes not with glory, but with deep and irreparable pain. What David will discover next will be the price of war, the price of a life marked by the blood of his own son. Brace yourself, because what comes next is not just a military defeat, but a tragedy of epic proportions. What will happen when David must make the choice between being the king of Israel or the father of Absalom? The battlefield is still fresh with the smell of blood and dust, but David's true pain is far from resolved. Even after his military victory over Absalom, the king of Israel feels an immense weight on his chest, heavier than any armor or sword he has ever worn. He has won the war, but he has lost his son, and nothing in the world could erase the wound that this has caused. Absalom, with all his vanity and pride, has fallen before David's forces. But it is not the death of the rebel that will consume the king's heart. It is the personal tragedy that unfolds before him. David, on his knees, with tears in his eyes, mourns the death of his son. The king, who once faced giants with unshakable courage, now bows before his own fate, lost in a sea of regret and pain. "Would that I had died in your place, Absalom," David cries, a cry from the heart of a father that should never have been given. The victory seems bitter, tasteless, like a prize not worth winning. For in the end, David understands what many leaders never discover. The true cost of power lies not only in the battles fought with weapons, but in the battles fought within each person. The weight of regret, the pain of loss, the knowledge that despite all his strength, he could not save the person he loved most in the world, his son. But as David sinks into the darkness of his own soul, the kingdom of Israel, which has long been adrift, begins to show signs of renewal. But the price of renewal will be high, and he knows that it will be he who must pay it. What comes next will not only be about restoring the kingdom, but about restoring himself, about finding some kind of peace in the midst of the storm he has caused. And the next chapter will bring an unexpected decision, a choice that will test the limits of his faith and his love. And in the midst of it all, the question remains, how can David, the man after God's own heart, find redemption after such a devastating tragedy? He is now seeking something deeper, something that will bring him back to his old passion, the Ark of the Covenant. David, who has always had a heart for God, wants to bring back to Jerusalem the presence of God, symbolized by the Ark. The idea of bringing the Ark to the city is an action loaded with symbolism, as if he were trying to renew his covenant with God, and perhaps find redemption for his own sins there. However, David soon comes face to face with a reality he did not expect. The people are not prepared for what this means. The tragedy of the transport of the Ark, when Uzzah, trying to stop it from falling, is struck by lightning, reminds David of something painful. He knows that sacred things cannot be trifled with, and this tragic mistake puts a temporary break on his search for a renewed relationship with God. David, however, does not give up. The weight of Uzzah's fall teaches him an important lesson. Holiness demands reverence, and the search for redemption cannot be rushed. He walks away, but the flame in his heart still burns brightly. What lies ahead for David will be a tortuous path, but he knows that in order to restore what was lost, he must first deeply understand himself and his place before God. And as he struggles to do so, new challenges begin to emerge, tests of character and faith that will cause the king to reevaluate not only his destiny, but the destiny of the entire kingdom. Now the big question is, can David, with all his weight of error and regret, restore the kingdom in the eyes of God and the people, or will he be consumed by the storm of his own making? And so David, the man after God's own heart, comes to the end of his journey. After a life marked by victories and defeats, joys and sorrows, he now faces his greatest accomplishment, the building of the temple in Jerusalem. A project that becomes the dream of a king who knew that his reign needed to be more than military conquests. It needed to be a reflection of his commitment to God, to faith, and to the promise of a better future for his people. However, David would not live to see the temple built. His dream, his vision, would be passed on to his son Solomon, who would later shape this sacred work. But David's greatness lies not only in what he achieved, it lies in the legacy he leaves behind, in the faith that never wavered, even in the face of the greatest adversity. The king, who began as a simple shepherd, the boy who defeated a giant with a stone, ended his life not only as Israel's greatest king, but as a deeply human figure, with flaws and virtues intertwined, but with an unwavering determination to seek redemption. He knew that in the end, true victory lay not in external battles, but in the internal ones, in the heart of who he was, and in his relationship with God. David's story is a story of life, of sacrifices, of struggles and victories, but it is also a reminder that no matter how difficult it may be, we must never give up fighting for what we believe in. No matter how many times we fall, what matters is how we get back up, how we seek truth and forgiveness, and how we leave a legacy for those who come after us. If you enjoyed this fascinating story and want to know more about David's impact on the history of Israel, share this video with your friends. Comment below what impressed you most about the king's journey, and don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring and thought-provoking content. See you in the next video.